Hi everyone, once again I'm featuring my wizard deck. If you haven't checked out my previous video, be sure to do so right now, because this is in some way a continuation of the previous video. I'm building upon my past experience, and I've swapped out a couple of cards. Most notably, the Page Pipers are gone. I've replaced it with one Earthrise Hotel, which synergizes well with Career Fair. In addition, I've also slotted in a Progenitor so I can have my entire 6 memory rig up at once. First, let's introduce the matchup. I'm up against none other than one of my buddies who plays very well, James Bennett. You might know him as Frost Duty, none other than the infamous creator of the Government Takeover deck. And I'm playing up against his Blue Sun, so you can bet your life there's only 6 agendas in there, and it's a Government Takeover deck. Probably different from the breed that you might know it as, but we'll see how we can deal with it. Unfortunately, this is pretty much the worst matchup for my deck. Firstly, Wayland doesn't really run many assets, so Wizard's ability will be very limited. Secondly, he has the potential of running Power Shutdown, which screws over Progenitor and Net Ready Eyes. Thirdly, he probably runs some sort of flatline, so I need to keep up on my credits. Not to mention that I don't run Plus Creed. Finally, with Curtain Wall in play, Morningstar becomes quite a useless breaker. In fact, it will become a liability. So these are the weaknesses that you must identify before even beginning the first draw of the match, because you have to know what your limitations are and try to play around it. So on to our objective-based commentary for today. I want you to think about this. Am I making runs on the correct server? It seems like a very straightforward question, but in reality it has a lot of ramifications on how this game pans out. So let's get down to it. He opens with Ice on HQ and a powerful current in the form of Housekeeping, but that actually works to my advantage because my first click involves installing Symmetrical Visage and discarding my York to the current. This turns my retrieval run on the same turn, so I can retrieve my York and get a 2 credit discount, which is really nice. Thanks, Housekeeping. Pleasure doing work with you. So because of that, I now have one of my 3 components of my rig set up very quickly, and that's looking good for me. Unfortunately, the Oversight AI comes on turn 2. It's not a curtain wall, but it's still pretty bad. Basically, my only solution for this is the David, which I do not draw into, so I do not bother contesting it. Instead, I'm just going to settle my money by installing a Liberator account and trashing a York as Housekeeping tax. So he reinstalls an Ice on R&D, it's probably the Hadrian's Wall, and the game continues. He installs an upgrade on HQ. Alright, passing the turn over to me, I inject into my 3rd York, so all of them's in the bin right now, a 2nd Symmetrical Visage, and quite a few resources. I have 2 clicks left. I cannot afford to install anything right now. I really don't want to install anything because of the Housekeeping tax. I'd rather spend the entire of next turn installing all my cards. So here I trash a legwork because the upgrade on HQ is probably a Christian grid, and I don't think I can get into HQ too easily, especially seeing now that it's super stacked with upgrades. So yeah, if you remember my opening hand, it consisted of very lousy stuff. I'm talking Progenitor, Medium, David, Net Ready Eyes, no money, no card. Okay, there was a Liberator accounts. No money, I mean, a very clunky money card and no card draw. That's why I mulliganed it. It is a mulligan, is a good mulligan against most corps, but I regret mulliganing it for this game. Having an opening David is so important against Blue Sun. That is something I definitely underestimated. If I had the David in my opening hand, he wouldn't be this rich, and I could actually contest him. So meanwhile, I'm running his R&D, and you notice that I'm running R&D instead of HQ, and he's not rezzing the eyes on R&D, which probably means it's a big fat Hadrian's Wall. And it's quite obvious why he doesn't want to res it. If he does, I can assault his HQ like no tomorrow. My opening hand also contained Medium, which I could have used to assault his R&D because he left it open first turn. So I'm really regretting my decision not to keep my opening hand. It was a very good opening hand against Blue Sun, but now I'm stuck with a hand where there's no David, which means that I can't get past most of his ice, and that's a huge trouble. Housekeeping is still on the board. I really need to steal an agenda to pull ahead. So this turn, I perform mega installs, as I mentioned, installing 2 daily casts and a medium in one go, trashing a Morningstar. And this brings me down to 2 credits. My opponent sees this, he's on 17 credits himself, and he's like, well, he has only 3 cards, he has so few credits. I'm going to exploit this by naked advancing an agenda. Well, of course I have to go for it. So here goes. At the start of my turn, I gain 2 cards and 4 daily cast credits. So the drip economy and card draw is working out very well for me. Earthrise Hotel is a welcome in this deck, and it is proving to be very useful in click compression. In 1 card can do so much work. That's fantastic. Even though it costs 4 credits, it's fine. The problem is, can I afford to run the server? I decide that I can. If it's a government takeover, I lose the game immediately. But it's not. It's a Triarch, which means I'm alive. I just have to take 12 credits off Liberator accounts, and I'm good. Well, my opponent should have seen this coming, and he admitted it was a mistake later on. But I think the most important part about this is that firstly, it turns off the punitive counter-strike for 6 damage, and more importantly, it gets rid of the housekeeping tax, so finally I can actually get some work done. I don't have to constrain all my installs to 1 turn. Here I draw into my Net Ready Eyes, and I've had worse in my hand, so I'll definitely be looking to trigger I've had worse off Net Ready Eyes in the near future. Note that I still only have 1 of my 3 breakers up. I'm not in too big of a hurry because knowing his deck being so full of 3-pointers, it takes him very long to score agendas. So I can spend most of my time setting up slowly. I get the David out before I destroy my hand with Net Ready Eyes, and sure enough it hits the I've had worse. So I freely drop back to 4 cards. In the meantime, he continues pulling ahead of me in credits. As I said, I'm not very worried about that right now. What I'm most worried about is getting my entire rig up and getting through his big barriers. Should I be playing aggressively on his central servers? Perhaps I should. Remember the objective-based commentary we've talked about earlier? Besides running the correct server, you also need to know when it's the right time to run. And I should be running, and that's exactly what I do here. I stim hack into his HQ once I found my clone chip stim hack combo. First is a Bastion, which is absolutely perfect because I'll just bring out my Morningstar, break for 1 credit using all my stim hack credits, and I hit the inside of his server. He chooses not to res the inner ice, so we play the Caprice side game. And do I win? I don't. I get knocked out. But here I made a very big mistake. Yes, after this turn, I should have ran his HQ again. Instead, I went to Little Dark KT, which is usually the right choice, but you really want to exploit the window where they cannot do anything against you. Right now, he was able to react by advancing one of the inner eyes on HQ. So that is very bad news for me. I should have hit his HQ as many times as I can to deny him the Caprice mistake. In a moment, you'll see why denying the HQ upgrades is very important, but for now, I chose to sit back, and this is going to cost me the game. This is the window I have to abuse the fact that he's not in a very stable condition right now, that he hasn't found all his combo pieces yet. This is the time to strike. Strike while the iron is hot. Now that he has found more ice and is capable of defending his central HQ, it's going to get really difficult to contest the Caprice. I'm flush with credits, but what's limiting me is not my credit pool, but rather the fact that I don't have a universal solution to all his ice. And that is something I should have identified earlier on. So I'm making the big mistake of playing too passively, building up my rig with this deck, when in reality I don't really need that many credits at all. And here you see why I should be denying his HQ. He reses off the grid, and at that point I know there's no way I can contest that server. I need to get through HQ at least twice, because the other upgrade on HQ is almost certainly a Christian grid. So instead, I tackle R&D instead. I hit a toe move, pretty painful. I use Net Ready Eyes on Morningstar, thinking that he would res the Hadrian's Wall, but he res a toe move against me instead, so I get kicked out. One fun fact is that Morningstar's at 5 strength. With a combination of Net Ready Eyes and Ice Cover, you can actually bring yourself up to 7 strength, which is pretty cool. Now, I really want to install the Mimic here, but there's not enough memory. Turns out that the 2 turntables in my deck are within the bottom 7 cards of my deck. Such is life. Yes, if you haven't noticed by now, the game has gone on for a long time and I've drawn through almost my entire deck. Unfortunately, it's not gonna really help here when I have to deal with such big eyes and he's about to score an agenda. So over to me, my first draw turns out to be a godsend. It's a spoon. The perfect answer against R&D. So I immediately go to town with it. Am I running the right server? I think I am. Perhaps I should be contesting HQ. But here what he does is not rest the Hadrian's Wall. He's only on 11 credits. So yeah, he doesn't want to rest the Hadrian's Wall because he knows that if he does, I can run through HQ freely. So I guess I'm running the right server here. I'm collecting valuable medium tokens, but I'm not seeing the agendas I need. But maybe I should be running HQ instead. I don't know. It's a pretty tough call, but I think R&D being so lightly defended is the right call. Problem is, the agenda that he was about to score was a priority requisition, and he gets the Hadrians online. Well, that's actually good news for me. I saw this coming, and my counter against that is, as mentioned, the 7 strength Morningstar. Well, it's 6 strength, but Hadrian's got lowered to 6 strength as well. So I'm going to get a huge medium dig off. On my final run, it's going to be 7 medium counters. And I'm going to trash every single trashable thing in my way. Yes, a demolition run would be very nice right now, but against most corps they won't give you such easy medium access. One very stunning trait about this Blue Sun deck is that running only 6 agendas, he can control his agenda density very well, and he's not too worried about deep medium digs. As you see right now, I'm seeing lots and lots of cards. No agendas. You have to be quite sure that all the agendas are in his hand, and he's more than happy to let it through. This is horrible news for me. So I've seen 7 cards, none of them are agendas. I'm in a lot of trouble. And he advances the Hadrian's Wall, so my days of medium digging are done. I knew I only had 2 turns to exploit the power of medium, and it's all now gone. I could run through R&D with the David at this point, but I figure I need to save the David for the curtain wall on the remote. And here I make the other big mistake. What should I have done this turn? Of course I should have ran his HQ. I should have tried my best to deny him the curtain wall, his off the grid, his caprice, destroy his combo. That was the big chance I had to destroy this combo. What I didn't see coming was him bouncing the curtain wall and installing it on HQ. It's an obvious move. I should have seen it coming. Now that he has curtain wall on HQ, he's unstoppable. I don't run knife in this deck, so all I have are a couple of Davids for me to get through the curtain wall. 2 Davids only give me 2 shots at HQ. Just enough to trash a crit sim grid and trash off the grid. That's awful. That really is awful. That's assuming I win the Caprice side game on my very first shot. So what is 29 credits going to do for me? Nothing. I can't get into the server at all. So this is really an awful position, and I really set myself up for this. I should have tried my best to contest his HQ, and I paid the iron price because I did not. So over to me, there's really not much I can do at this point to contest HQ or his remote. The thing is, once he solidifies HQ to the point where I don't have enough David tokens to get through multiple times, the only way out is R&D. And of course, he guarded very well against that by purging virus counters the turn before. Sure, there's still 1 medium counter on it thanks to Progenitor, but that's only going to help so much, especially since I've already seen most of the cards in R&D. I mean, the agendas are probably in HQ. That sucks. Knowing that they are there, but you can't get to them at all. So once again, this game I played way too passively. I was getting way too much money when in fact I should have been running. Who needs money, honestly? All my breakers are so cheap. David breaks stuff for free. Why do you need 30 odd credits? It beats me. I'm really flummoxed. I've had worse in hand, so there's no need to worry about punitive Counter-Strike at all. I should have been running his central servers. No excuse. I suppose I was afraid of the Nebula. Even with David on board, Nebula has 4 strength thanks to ice cover, and that will screw me big time. But it was a risk that I should have taken, because letting him get 2 servers that are virtually uncontestable is a huge mistake. I'm in a lot of trouble right now. So basically right now I'm just gearing up to make a power play on R&D. I have a medium in my heap, and I have a David in hand. This obviously means that at some point I'm going to make 3 R&D runs, using David's to break 6 Hadrian's Wall subroutines and accessing lots of cards with medium. And he begins advancing a government takeover in that remote. As we chat about it, I realized I only have 2 turns left to live. So it's either now or never. Might as well be now, huh? So I finally decided that Morningstar is the most useless card in my deck. In my rig right now. So I'm gonna uninstall it, bring out the medium, bring out the David. As I mentioned, 3 runs on R&D. The first one net me 2 accesses, the second nets me 4 accesses, and the last 6 accesses. No agendas yet. Let's do that again. Again, you have to ask yourself, is this the right server to run on? Now that I've been cornered into, it's like being cornered into one corner of the boxing ring. You have no way out. Of course, I'm grasping on strings right here. There's nothing more I can do. I see 2 assets, both of which are trash, a Christian Grid and an asset rather. And now I'm going to see 6 cards. If I don't find an agenda here, if I don't find 2 agendas here, I'm toast. Nothing? Nothing at all. Yes, the agendas were all in his hand. Well, actually no. The agendas weren't in his hand. It's just that I got really unlucky with my accesses. All the high-risk investments turned out to be at the bottom of the deck. So I'm just going to speed up the video because he continues advancing the government takeover and eventually wins it out. I conceded the game knowing that I had absolutely no way to get through Hadrian's Wall or Curtain Wall thereafter. The only thing left in my deck was 1 retrieval run, and there were no Davids in my heap to retrieve. They were both on the board, all expended. So it comes down to very poor decision with regards to running that cost me the game. Granted, my deck is not robust enough against Blue Sun, and that will always be a problem, but it definitely can be countered by good play, and there were definitely instances where I can hammer HQ but chose not to. In the end, the eyes that were guarding HQ were merely a toll booth into Changeling, both of which I could deal with when my rig was partially set up with just a York, Morningstar, and Net Ready Eyes. I just chose to take the easy route, what seemed like the easy route anyway, in R&D, and I paid dearly for it. He should be exploiting the fact that his HQ was not very well guarded before he found the Curtain Wall. Once he found the Curtain Wall and hit it on HQ, that was the end of me. Granted, I got unlucky on the medium accesses, but still, that could have been much better played on my part, and it just comes down to knowing which servers to run. R&D might look like a juicy target, but HQ is generally where you want to hit, especially when you are getting to the early mid-game stage, and that is why this deck packs legwork. I need to remind myself that HQ is sometimes much better than R&D, even with a medium out. If you're too focused on one server, you're just going to lose to the corp's nasty tricks that they have up their sleeve, and that certainly occurred this game. Well, valuable learning lesson. Hope you have learned something from it as well. Thanks for watching. Happy net running.